we really didn't have any laws about abortion in the United States in the early 1800s. And if you think about it, what was happening then was chattel slavery. And so people were very much encouraged to reproduce to help create a labor movement, or not even a movement, but a labor community that was forcibly attempting to, keep people enslaved, especially people who are descendants of African enslaved people. And so that was active in the United States. And you also had a very active community of homeopaths and witches and midwives as well as medical doctors. And, we have a lot of great history that shows us that it was medical doctors who got really pissed off that they had some competition because some herbalists could give you a tea that could help make your menstrual cycle come down, or that there were midwives who were putting them out of business because they were helping deliver children in a completely different and more humane way than medical doctors. So it was medical doctors who had access to wealth and power that chose to create laws around abortion and make abortions illegal, essentially, or something that only they could provide and offer.
Oh, wow. So they became gatekeepers, basically.
Oh, absolutely. And that's just the history of body autonomy for people who are born and forcibly assigned female at birth. And what a lot of people don't know is that it was actually the Republican Party under Ronald Reagan as governor here in California who actually created a law or tried to make it legal that therapeutic abortions could occur. And so therapeutic abortions are abortions that can occur because someone has experienced incest or has become pregnant due to a rape, or their life would be endangered if they maintained the pregnancy or if they gave birth. So it was the Republican Party that actually really fought to be able to have access to this type of procedure because they recognized how important it was to the pregnant person to make those choices and to not experience any more trauma. And yet, here we are today with people from that party who are trying to create even more drastic measures that would even erase therapeutic abortion choices. There's also two other terms that you might hear about when talking about abortion. One is selective abortion, and this is one of the terms that comes up a lot for disabled people when talking about abortion. And selective abortion is basically selecting to terminate a pregnancy because there is a disability or because of the sex that's forcibly assigned when the fetus is growing. And this is a really common experience that has a very thick and deep traumatic history for many of us that we don't always talk about. And we also need to understand, like, how does body autonomy intersect with this? And where does my personal values stop and another person's body begin? And that's really the conversation that I think a lot of disabled people are not having, because these are really hard conversations that we take very personally because it talks about our existence here on the planet and the reality of how eugenics has been used to violate other people's body autonomy and reduce their access to choice. And so that's selective abortion as a term. And then there's elective abortion. And elective abortion is what's the term that's used when people make the choice to terminate a pregnancy. So a majority of the abortions here in the United States are elective. Many of the laws that you'll hear about will try to use the language of therapeutic abortion, so incest, rape, and life endangerment. And then you'll hear people like the anti-abortion movement proponents who will use selective abortion language and try to hijack the disability justice language to articulate why they're against abortion. So we see that happening, and it's really important for us to understand that language, how it's being manipulated, and also where our own personal values fall around this conversation.
Wasn't that what Clarence Thompson was doing recently when he was saying he was using language of eugenics to say that, well, people shouldn't have the right to control their own bodies because it could be used for eugenic purposes.
Absolutely. And, it's interesting. He'll make a statement of dissent around certain topics and will be silent around others. We also hear this language, with Justice Ginsburg, who many people love and adore, and she's a great justice. And she also uses a very binary language. When she was added to the Supreme Court in the 90s, you can find her conversation at that time, she definitely was saying, you know, Roe v. Wade is an important law to maintain because it puts women at an equal status of men, where women get to make a decision about their lives. And if we overturn Roe v. Wade, we're making a statement that women are not equal to men. So that's another example of that binary language, but also laws are binary. Laws use binary language. Insurance companies use that language. And so for many of us and many of you out there who are non-binary or trans, and who struggle with that language, there are ways to work within it and to get the care that you need. And you can also find support for navigating that, to find the quality care that you deserve. What we're seeing now when language is shifting, especially when talking about late term procedures, which are procedures that are in the third trimester, so over 24 weeks, those are, first of all, less than 1% of all abortions that are done in the United States. And yet these are the abortions that anti-choice and anti-abortion folks are focusing on. And it isn't really something that happens all the time, but they're using it and calling it partial birth abortion. We're also now seeing language about babies born alive. And this is legislation that is being used to talk about people who have decided that their child is experiencing some type of anomaly, that either the child is in pain, or it will die once it's born, or it will harm the life of the person carrying as well as the life of the child. And I use the term child in this scenario because at the third trimester, it is known that a fetus can live outside of the womb. And oftentimes third trimester procedures are chosen by people who wanted to parent and who definitely have a connection to their child. And they're devastated by the reality that their child is evolving without a brain, or that their child has a hole in their heart, or that a child will just never be able to live past the third day. And, you know, the trauma of what that can do to the body, not only to the spirit and the mind and physically, is drastic. And so this language of babies born alive focuses on people who don't know anything about the body or anything about science. And it's the idea that, if this, so usually what happens in third trimester procedures is cell division is stopped through an injection of the fetus. And so the fetus stops growing, and then labor is induced. And so what ends up happening is the person does give birth to a stillborn child. And these laws and legislations are things such as, if there's involuntary muscle movement when the stillborn has been birthed, the doctor must do everything in their power to make sure that the child receives 100% quality care if they can be saved and, resurrected, if it will. And so for many people who are probably hospice workers or, death doulas, they know that the body does a variety of things, even when it's not necessarily quote unquote alive. And so these are the ways that people are attempting to undermine choices that people make, to criminalize not only parents that are traumatized and mourning and grieving, and usually who choose that option because they want to hold their child, they want to bury their child, they want to have a ceremony with their child, and they're being targeted, and their trauma is being used and pimped out by anti-abortion communities that know nothing about that trauma. And if you are someone who's watching and you do decide that you need access to quality care, you might live outside the United States where it's not legal. There is a website, Women on the Web, which was a spin-off, if that's the right word, or a branch of Women on Waves, which was a boat that doctors had, I believe it was licensed from the Danish, and they would pick women up and then take them out, or pregnant people up, and then take them out into international waters, provide them with a medication abortion, which is misoprostol, mifepristone, which can be taken orally. And what those do is they stop the cell division of the fetus and they induce a miscarriage. They will ship to you those pills if you need them. And their website, Sins team will put in the comments. But you do need to be 10 weeks pregnant or less. And they do ask you about 25 questions to assess how you think you are pregnant and what access is available for you. So there are international resources for people who do want to have that type of medication abortion. And there are also abortion procedures such as a manual vacuum aspirator procedure, which does not require electricity. It's portable. It's quick and fast to use. And I encourage all my people who have the capacity to be around blood to try to find someone to train you on how to use a manual vacuum aspirator machine, because that's one of the ways that you too can support people in your community who might need abortions moving forward in the future. I will say that first trimester abortion procedures are incredibly safe, and they, when done correctly and by someone who has been trained to do them, they are not as painful as people might think, and they are actually a very quick procedure of about 10 minutes only. So, you know, abortion, it is a medical procedure, it is a part of healthcare, and the reality is that many of us in our communities know how to do this, can offer abortion care, and we can also access it. We need to keep in mind that homeopathic options were available, and those still might work for some people, and other parts of the world still use them, as well as midwives know how to support people who are pregnant and don't want to be. So it might look like us going back to some of the older ways that our ancestors existed and accessed quality care, and it doesn't look like going to a doctor. And for some people, especially some Crips, that might feel really great and relieving. Yeah.